Hello everyone. This story is about, what if Naruto was adopted by Guy and fell for Kurenai? Please like, share and subscribe. Now let's start. Tsunade rubbed her head as she sat up, dealing with her worst hangover in recent memory. She usually channeled some chakra through her body to break all of the remaining alcohol down when she went to sleep. Something she had developed solely so that she could drink as much as she wanted and never be hungover. Shizune, where are we? Last thing I remember is hearing Jiraiya call me at the bar. The female Sannin winced at the croak her words came out as, trying desperately to recall when and how she had fallen asleep. She groaned as she got out of bed, rubbing her temples as she began channeling healing chakra to clear her head. Tsunade-sama. Jiraiya-sama tried to carry you here after you passed out, but his new apprentice ranted at him for being perverted and carried you here instead. They are waiting here with another person that seems to know you, but he won't tell me who he is. Tsunade followed the sounds of her apprentice/caretaker's voice to a separate room in their hotel. She recognized Jiraiya, but had to take several extra looks at the other two people in the room. At first, she thought that Jiraiya had somehow resurrected the yondaime, but a second look showed that this person was too young and had different clothing. The number of layers he was wearing had to be boiling right now, though she guessed he might be able to channel an element that cooled him off. The real kicker was the last person she noticed, someone she knew for a fact was dead and had been for some time. Not going to faint on us again, are you? I know you must have gotten weaker in your time running away from your responsibilities. But another episode like that would be ridiculous. Words failed the world's greatest medic as she stared at her great uncle. She usually hit people that talked to her like that, but this was someone she didn't even think could be alive. Slowly, her hands formed the seal for Genjutsu release, trembling as they did so. Kai. She waited as nothing happened, the shaking in her hands getting worse. No, Kai. Kai. Shizune, Jiraiya, and Tobirama all walked over to her, Shizune grasping her hands and Jiraiya her shoulders. The Nidaime simply stood and watched, trying to ignore the tears forming in her eyes. Suheim, he's really here. I'm not sure how much longer he is going to be willing to put up with being in the world we live in, but he's here now. Tsunade brushed Jiraiya's hands off of her. Shizune releasing her hands as she walked over to one of her dearest family members, someone that she had admired for years. Tobirama didn't move, not when she began moving toward him, nor when she wrapped him in a hug. You're real. I missed you and Gigi so much. Everybody else is. And I was so lonely. Tsunade trailed off as her tears fell, too focused for her massive pride to interfere any longer. Naruto looked away, their reunion made him feel awkward. He wondered if he would react like this if he met his mother or father. Tsunade, I see life has been hard for you. That doesn't change things. Tsunade looked up to see Tobirama was still scowling, making her cringe. The first thing Sara did when I came back was explain everything that has happened since my death. Your change, it pains me to say, is one of the things I was most disappointed in. Nidaime-sama, maybe it's best not to have a confrontation like this. Tsunade has had deal with a lot of pain in her life, a long period of mourning isn't unheard of. Tsunade released her hold on her family member as both looked at Jiraiya. Neither really surprised that he would support her after the older shinobi's words. I know, what small amount of us lived through the first shinobi war all died in the second, save Tsunade herself. Then, the man she fell in love with died in her arms as she tried in vain to heal him, breaking the spirit of the last Senju. Sara told me, I just believe that the last decade and a half are more than enough time for any grieving. If I had done the same when my brother died, Konoha would have fallen. Neither of the Sannin would look at the Nidaime, knowing the man had lost nearly everyone he cared about. Friends and family both. That hadn't stopped him from sacrificing himself for the good of others, and he was holding his niece to the same standard. Why should I care if you're disappointed? Look what your dedication to the village got you, childless with an early grave. I have already outlived you, even if my early work wound up with me being childless like you. What gives you the right to lecture me? Tsunade was shouting now, her happiness at seeing her long-dead uncle evaporating under his judgment. The whole of the village is my family, its children mine. I died for the lives of my students, and the lives of all in the village. Contrary to popular belief, the Kinkaku squad didn't kill me. I killed all of them and died of chakra exhaustion. So tell me, why should I let my family suffer and save myself when I could save them that pain? Tsunade turned away in anger, not wanting to acknowledge Tobirama's argument. This is pointless. Suheim, you've been recalled into active duty. Sensei commands your presence back in Konoha to start that medic program you wanted back during the war. After that invasion, we need to raise resources before someone strikes back. Jiraiya didn't want to pull the command card yet. But he was afraid that bringing the Nidain was actually hurting their chances of convincing Tsunade to come back. I'm not going back, Jiraiya. I didn't the last 5 times you begged me to, and I'm not going to now. I don't care what Sensei wants, even if he somehow forces me to come back, he can't make me do anything. As far as my Mednin program, he's 20 years too late for that. A glowing chain wound its way around Tsunade when she turned to leave, rooting her in place. You are the antithesis of all things youthful. I can't believe you're practically declaring yourself a nuke nin rather than return to your home, let alone with the Hokage's orders. I'll haul you and myself in chains before I let you disrespect Gigi. Naruto regretted speaking as Tsunade turned around. A strange suspicion that he may have crossed a line with the enraged demon before him. Did you just call me old, Gaki? Too bad, Jiraiya was probably hoping you'd last longer than his last apprentice. Nothing but another waste of space determined to get himself killed for other people. Tsunade attempted to snap the chains securing her. But instead she began to feel a burning sensation like her body had just had flaming acid poured in it. The chain holding onto her began to glow with a ruddy glare, the face of her captor pointed at the ground. Naruto. Stop this, she doesn't know. Tobirama silenced Jiraiya, shaking his head. He also stopped the sage from attempting to stop Naruto physically. What are you doing? We can't let him rage like this, I thought we just discussed this after what happened with Itachi. Tsunade needs to learn her lesson more than this boy does. She's the epitome of spoiled, I saw what my brother did myself. This will teach her not to insult men with more worth in their pinky than she had in her whole body. It was your student she just insulted, do you not care? A roar of rage came from Naruto before Jiraiya could answer, yet it could still be understood. Jiraiya was shocked, Naruto was still in control. My birth father wasn't a waste of space. He accomplished more both for his village and for his family in his lifespan than you have in 2 of his. As far as you being old, that has nothing to do with being youthful. Youth is the philosophy the man that adopted me adheres to, and the philosophy his own father believed in. Work hard, be honorable, protect your comrades, give your all into everything. The glow subsided as Naruto returned to normal, though he continued to glare at Tsunade. How about one of your detestable bets, Sannin? If I can master one of my father's techniques in a week, you come back no struggle. If you win, I'm sure you can think of something. Once more. Keton, Karyu Enden. A giant blast of flames shaped like a dragon left Sasuke's mouth, blowing apart the spire of stone he had aimed at. Unfortunately, he had yet to accomplish his actual goal. He was supposed to force Kakashi to drop his Toton Jutsu without using his Sharingan. He had gotten impatient about 20 minutes into the exercise, and began destroying the field they were in to force Kakashi to show himself. Kakashi had, unbeknownst to Sasuke, been about 4 feet behind the younger ninja for quite some time, simply walking around anytime Sasuke turned. If Sasuke had bothered using his right ton, say Hiba, Kakashi would have been caught quite some time ago. He faded back into view, whistling to get Sasuke's attention. Too bad, guess I can't teach you the Toton Jutsu yet. Next time, think about this, the Sandaime knows every jutsu in the village, but more importantly, he knows when to use them. They were approaching the end of their time on patrol, they would be heading back into the village in just 3 days. Sasuke was looking forward to getting back. He felt bad about it, but hadn't even learned the names of the other Chunin on patrol with him. Kakashi-sensei, do you think that I'll be able to at least get a draw with Naruto if neither of us use our power-ups? Ever since I realized how far apart we've grown in terms of skill, he has become a kind of benchmark. I honestly can't say. His training is more severe than yours in most respects, so he's stronger and faster. You have more techniques that are capable of killing, but you wouldn't use them on him anyway. If you used the Sharingan and him the chains, you have a good chance, but with the Kyuubi and the Hashiman he would overpower you. You're close, but I think you should train with him when he gets back if you can, that'll be the best answer you can get. Sasuke nodded, planning on doing just that. Kakashi had changed after Sakura died, making himself more available to help Sasuke and Kiba both. Sasuke didn't think it was right, but he knew that Kakashi blamed himself. It was strange, Kakashi had taken the place that had once belonged to Itachi, save for the fact that he actually trained Sasuke, instead of poking him in the head. Sensei, you'll help me get that audience with the Hokage, right? I know I'm technically a clan head now, but you're a very highly respected jounin. You should be able to help me find out what really happened. Kakashi just nodded, his book already out. He hadn't been reading it as much lately. Ever since he cooled down, he had felt bad about when he snapped at Yugao. He still remembered when he had been in charge of her in ANBU, and she was definitely one of the soldiers he had been closer to. He sighed, putting his book away. He just didn't feel like reading it again. Shikamaru found most things troublesome. This included training, walking, eating, breathing, and most things in between. His list of not troublesome things had recently expanded to include hanging out with the Sandaime Hokage. It really was hanging out too. The old man just called him in when he was bored with paperwork and played shogi with him or told him stories about his experiences in war. So far, he had even managed to last as many as 13 moves before being summarily beaten by the clever old monkey. Your strategies are inventive, but you aren't quite able to read my own yet. You don't utilize your king, despite it being the second most versatile piece. Remember that sacrificing your pieces should be your last plan, not your first. Now, have I told you about when my father got into a fight with the Shodaime? Shikamaru looked up from the board, shaking his head. The Sandaime had so many damn stories that he sincerely doubted the man would live long enough to tell them all to him. It was actually before the village was founded. I was only 5 years old. The Senju and Uchiha were bringing all the major clans in the area together, having begun their push for alliance. The Hyuga, Aburame, and Inuzuka had already joined, leaving the Nara, Akimichi, Yamanaka, and Sarutobi as the last large clans that hadn't joined. Your 3 clans had all allied with each other already though, leaving the Sarutobi as the only major clan to stand against joining what would become Konoha. Shikamaru may have been a genius, but all of his time sleeping left his pre-Konoha history shoddy. He remembered Sarutobi Sasuke as being one of the greatest ninja to serve in the first generation of Konoha though, which stood out directly against Hiruzen's words. Now, my father was the greatest in the clan, and he knew that in terms of numbers and power, we were easily trumped. He refused to just sign away our freedom, however, and challenged Senju Hashirama to a one-on-one fight, to end with surrender or death. Hashirama accepted, reasoning that he was the strongest ninja alive, and thus could easily defeat my father. Now, they fought in the area that would later become Training Ground 44 here in Konoha, as it was significantly less wooded back then. Before the battle, he introduced me to Enma, the Monkey King. This story was slowly moving from Shikamaru's list to the larger side. He knew about the Sandaime summon, but if this was going to change into a fake-out to train him in the Kuchiyos no Jutsu, he would be most disappointed. My father began the battle by summoning his partner, who would eventually become mine. The Shodaime used his Mokuton Hijitsu, Jukai Koten, creating the flora of the Forest of Death. My father used the Adamantine Nioi and his mastery of Doton to try and fight back, destroying many trees and carving great gouges in the earth. My father's tale became incredulous then, saying that the Shodaime created a great wooden dharma to prove his superiority, but that is unimportant. When all was said and done, the rivers of the Forest of Death had been carved into the earth, and the Shodaime's powerful chakra seeped into the creatures that lived there, mutating them into the fierce monstrosities we know today. Now, Shikamaru, would you tell me why I have chosen this story to tell you? Shikamaru was seriously hoping he was wrong, but given his track record, set himself up for disappointment. You want me to learn the Kuchiyos no Jutsu, as it allowed someone like Sasuke Sarutobi to fight the Shodaime Hokage, even though he eventually lost? Hiruzen's smile caused the lazy Chunin to hang his head and sigh, murmurs of troublesome escaping his lips. Not quite. I want you to learn that technique for its versatility, something you currently lack. I also hope to teach you some ninjutsu, depending on your affinity. Actually, I was more hoping that you would sign my contract in particular. Enma and the others would be good for you. I miss teaching, and you are the best student I've had in years. Alarm bells about a dangerous increase in work levels sounded in Shikamaru's head, as well as louder bells stating that the old man would tell his mother if he didn't accept. Why do you say I lack versatility? My techniques aren't something that anyone can do. Hiruzen made a single hand seal and sent a soundless ninpo. Kage Nuibari at his prospective student, stunning the boy at seeing a non-clan member using one of their hidden techniques. Oh, but they can. Besides, the current largest enemy to Konoha is Orochimaru, and he knows exactly how all of your techniques work. The more you have, the greater surprise it will be to Orochimaru's forces should we encounter them. Now, do you agree to become the final apprentice of the Sandaime Hokage of Konoha, the professor of Konoha, the third man to wear the title Kami no Shinobi? Shikamaru gulped, taking a page from Naruto's book for once and making a decision that would cause him to work. Alright, Hokage-sama. No matter how troublesome it is, I'll try and be the next professor. Hiruzen smiled once more, his plans to protect Konoha one step further along. Naruto grunted as he continued to work with the night aim. Much to Jiraiya's relief, Tobirama appeared to prefer helping Naruto train to trying to convince Tsunade to come back. The fact that she had demanded Jiraiya to pay off her gambling debts when Naruto lost might have angered the serious man even more than her current state already had. The Rasengan had been finished within 2 days of the bet, making their new training just a pastime. Mostly. Naruto, you have a very strong affinity to Suiton, but you also have an affinity to the rare futon, do you not? Why do you have so few techniques in your affinities? Do they not teach them in the academy? Naruto stopped short, wondering how much about Konoha itself Hiruzen had told his old sensei. No, most academy students don't have the chakra reserves to use techniques like that. We learn the Henge, Kawarimi, and Bunshin. I had to learn the Kage Bunshin instead of the regular one, since my chakra is too dense to create immaterial copies. The blank, lifeless look on his hero's face made Naruto fear he might have so heavily shocked his hero that the Edo Tensei broke. How is that supposed to help genin survive? The Henge and Kawarimi are excellent, but the Bunshin? When I designed the academy, surface clinging was to be used to build reserves, until in the second year. Affinities were to be checked and simple techniques taught to the students. Naruto snapped out of his terrified state, wondering just why the night aim standards were lowered for academy learning. Fine, I'll show you some more Suiton jutsu for now. When we get back to Konoha, find someone that can teach you more futon. This one is pretty easy, and only requires the Ushi seal. Watch. The night aim turned to examine one of the many trees that was in the area Naruto and he had been training, before making said seal. Suiton, Mizurappa. A conical blast of water uprooted the tree that had been targeted, going on to carve a scar in the ground behind it. I can actually use it without any hand seals, but that will come with practice. Now, let's return to teaching you how to externalize chakra before transforming it. Surprisingly, given his stoic personality, Tobirama had become rather passionate about teaching Naruto. He was acting like a more relaxed version of the man from Hiruzen's stories. Tsunade-sama, why did you even agree to his bet? If the yondaime was really his father, there is no way he won't be able to use one of his techniques. Shizen had been trying to understand just why Tsunade had agreed to this bet for the last few days. Usually, the Sannin always made bets that were winnable, even though she always lost. Shizune, I don't want to admit it, but my uncle is right. I'm a shadow of my former self, and a disappointment to almost everyone I know. That boy demonstrated more control of the Kyuubi's chakra in that one moment than either of the other containers ever did. I guess I'm just curious enough to give him a chance. The two women's conversation was interrupted by the sound of perverted giggling, both of them looking to the window to notice Jiraiya writing in his notebook. Oh, and just how curious about my apprentice are you, Suheim? What are you gonna give him a chance at? Jiraiya was blasted from the window with one of Tsunade's monstrous punches, landing in a close to orderly heap in the field that his two companions were training in. Jiraiya-sensei? How did you get here? Naruto looked at Jiraiya in confusion, his current spar interrupted. As long as you're here, can you teach me more of the Toad ninjutsu you use? I think learning how to turn people to frogs and back will be super useful. Jiraiya managed to respond this time, groaning in pain and regret for not utilizing his common sense when he heard the makings of that joke. Naruto, leave your master on the floor. He can train you after he wakes up. Now, do you know any kenjutsu? The blonde nodded, unveiling the trophy he had won in his first combat mission. Interesting. Seeing as you have one of the 7 swords of Kiri, I think it will be appropriate to teach you their signature technique. The seal used requires you to put your left hand in a half seal vertically above your head, while the right hand makes the same seal at your sternum. The night aim demonstrated the jutsu afterwards, summoning a fog embankment with a whisper of ninpo. Kirigakure no jutsu. The moisture awakened the tough old sage, leaving him confused about his current whereabouts. Tsunade hadn't hit him quite hard enough to send him to Kiri, that would have broken something. The fog disappeared as Tobirama ceased channeling his chakra, getting a sigh of relief when Jiraiya noticed he had only just been kicked from the village. Practice that jutsu later. For now, I'm going to show you a little bit about how I defeated Uchiha Azuna. A match for his brother in every way but intimidation. A katana was released from a seal that had been added to his armor, most likely something he had grabbed after being resurrected. He was surprised to see Naruto release his legendary sword's hilt, and instead grasp the wire that hung from the eye of the needle. While I can use traditional kenjutsu, if a bit thrust heavy, I actually developed my own technique with an old sensei of mine. Rather than use this like the deliberate assassination tool it is, I can use the wire to wield it like a chakra-conductive harpoon. He began to spin the weapon, pleased that he had a style completely unique to show his idol. Tobirama allowed himself a short moment to be pleased once more with the prospect before him, though he took even more pleasure in showing that he was still not to be trifled with. A single kunai was thrown at Naruto, who dodged it easily. What happened next would leave Naruto in awe of both the Naidame and Yandame's genius once again. Hiruzen Giri. Naruto blacked out as he felt pain in his neck and shoulder, irritated that his hero had knocked him out once again. Naruto sighed and rubbed his head. Things had gone downhill all of a sudden. He had been knocked out by the reanimated Naidame close to 10 times in the 5 days that they had trained together. He was actually thankful that the Kyuubi could protect him from brain damage. This most recent headache wasn't Tobirama's fault though, no, this time it was Tsunade. He had awoken from yet another demonstration of the original Hiruzen to discover that Jiraiya had been drugged by Tsunade on the day he was to show her his abilities. Apparently, the slug Sannin had created an odorless, tasteless, and colorless drug that would cause malfunction in the chakra system, and had made it without an antidote, in a week. Even though she hadn't been in a fight in 15 years or so, her medical skills had apparently not degraded in the slightest. Flashback. Tobirama-sensei, why do you keep using the Hiruzen on me? I'm never going to have to fight someone that can use it. Actually, when I finish going over my father's notes, I'll probably be able to use it myself. Naruto was rubbing his head, both from the painful knockout strikes and the embarrassment in questioning his idol. That is exactly why I'm using it on you. Before you use the technique, it will be beneficial to get a feeling for how fast it really is. The first time I used the technique, my brother nearly bludgeoned me to death with his Mokuton abilities. I was stunned from the travel and didn't have the reflexes required to attack him before he attacked me. If you get fast enough to block my fist when I use the Hiruzen, you'll be a third of the way to using it yourself. Secretly, that information made Jiraiya weep inside, as he had tried for years to use the move unsuccessfully. True, he didn't train as hard as he used to, but he had no real need to get stronger. Maybe he would get back to training himself when he began training Naruto in earnest. That could wait though. Tsunade had actually agreed to go out and get a drink with him. Oddly, the only person not worrying was Tobirama. His apparent disappointment in his grandniece not reaching so far as to make him believe she would betray Konoha. Even after Shizune told them about how Orochimaru had approached them a week before in order to convince Tsunade to join Otogakure. She's too much like her grandmother to betray Konoha. Even with the reward that failure offered, she has sense enough not to help him. We will follow her chakra signature and assist her in her battle against the traitorous snake. He waited a few minutes for Shizune to help Jiraiya as much as she could, before signaling to follow him. He already knew where they were, and this time, the one that desecrated he and his brother's tombs would pay dearly. Sasuke was sitting in the Hokage's office, the audience that Kakashi had set up just beginning. He had begun to feel suspect on Itachi's reasons for wiping out their clan some time ago, but it had taken until now to discuss this with the Hokage. If the Hokage couldn't tell him anything new, he would have to force the information from Itachi himself. So, Sasuke, what did you need an audience with me for? I should say an official audience, since people regularly just walk in and talk to me. Hiruzen was hiding it perfectly, but he was worried. He hoped that Sasuke wasn't going to ask about Itachi. He wasn't sure whether or not he should just ignore the boy's wishes and tell Sasuke the truth. Too bad for him, it was decision time. I wanted to ask about that night, and Itachi. He told me then that the reason he slaughtered the clan was to test himself. That can't be true, he had people like you, Kakashi, Jiraiya, and even Hyuga Hayashi to try himself against. Or Guy, Naruto's father. Fighting the clan makes no sense. I want to know what really happened. Hiruzen rubbed his eyes and sighed, wishing that he was training his newest student instead of dealing with this. He stood up and walked to the large window that made up one of the walls of his office. I'll tell you the truth, Sasuke. I'll warn you now though, you aren't going to like or believe it. Naruto's group arrived at the scene of Orochimaru and Tsunade's fight to witness the slug Sannin backing away in terror from a boy a few years older than Naruto. He had very pale skin, 2 red dots on his forehead, and pastel green eyes. However, the thing that brought the most attention and seemed to be scaring Tsunade were the bones that had escaped the confines of his flesh. Blood was running down some of them, a few drips having gotten onto Tsunade. Suiton, Suiryu no Mugen no Mai. Tobirama formed his limitless water dragon much faster than Naruto had on the bridge. Its glowing yellow eyes fixed on the boy, closing in on Tsunade. With a deafening roar, the attack slammed into the boy, raising repeatedly and smashing into him over and over. A crater began to form as the serpentine missile drilled downwards, a red tinge appearing as its victim's blood began mixing with the water. Stop it, Naidame-sama. Tsuhime has hemophobia. Jiraiya's words got Tobirama to guide the attack towards Orochimaru and Kabuto before releasing it. In his current form, he could keep the attack going infinitely, but it wasn't likely to get another hit after his first move. Ah. So the talentless perv and failed attempt are here, along with the QB brat. Kabuto, heal Kimimaro. He should be enough to kill the brat. Naruto's eyes widened as he recognized Kabuto from his Chunin exams, though they widened further as the bone man stood back up. So, you found a Kaguya. Do you really think you and your two flunkies can stop us? Jiraiya shuddered as Orochimaru's creepy laugh rang out around them, the Kuzenagi already in his hands. I think I can beat you, your apprentice, and that woman together. Of course, I trust Kabuto to beat you and Tsunade's babysitter, leaving the zombie for me. I'll seal him away and forget I ever made the mistake of bringing him back. Tobirama simply removed his katana and kunai from their seals when the snake finished speaking, glaring at him all the while. You don't hold a candle, boy. If it weren't for everyone else here, I would just blow apart the nearest 100 square miles, as is, I'll have to actually fight. Orochimaru suppressed the shudder that he felt coming. No reason to shatter the facade of confidence he had been showing so far. If he had succeeded in finding the Totsuka blade, this fight would end in one solid hit, but without it he only had a 50/50 chance of victory. Naruto, go as far as you can while maintaining control. The Kaguya clan had particularly tough fighters, and that's without the training of a Kage-level ninja. Naruto released his resistance seals, his chakra chains, and the new Ibari coming back out. Got it, but won't someone need to protect Tsunade? She hasn't started moving again yet. Shizune nodded and moved to Tsunade's side. She began to clean off the small amount of blood that had gotten onto her teacher, but kept up her guard. The first one to make a move was Kimimaro, leaping towards Naruto and slashing a bone sword. Out of the way, trash. Orochimaru-sama will achieve victory either way, so give up now. Yanagi no Mai. Spikes grew from Kimimaro's elbows, shoulders, knees, and palms. The sword formerly in his hand dissolved into dust as it was dropped. He began launching stabbing attacks with his palms, adding in acrobatic spins and jumps to attack with all of the sharp surfaces on his body. The many chains coming from Naruto formed into a type of ethereal, flexible barrier that deflected the bone attacks, but he was unable to strike back. Without the time to form hand seals, he couldn't summon any help, and he didn't have the opening required to use any of his genjutsu and taijutsu techniques. Looks like we're even as is, though you look about 10 minutes from keeling over. Kimimaro ignored Naruto's baiting, knowing that there was no way that Naruto could know how close he was to the truth. He had been brought along under the assumption that Tsunade would side with them, and without her help he would likely die within a few weeks. We're nowhere near even, though you aren't quite the trash I thought you were. Prepare yourself, I'll show you the real power of the Shikatsu Myaku. Jiraiya was truly upset at Tsunade for the first time. Usually, he forgave her for just about anything, but poisoning him right before a battle was pretty hard to forgive. You look a little pale, Jiraiya. The least of the Sannin afraid of fighting the apprentice of the greatest mere apprentice? The great shinobi almost laughed, but he was weakened enough that he needed to be on guard for this fight. Just a little hangover, kid. Figured this handicap would make things fair. Of course, being the gallant Jiraiya meant that he was going to taunt his opponent even weakened as he was. It just wouldn't be right to fight without the banter. Jiraiya took a wide, defensive stance. Taijutsu wasn't his best subject, but he was very good at most ninja arts. A blue aura lit up around Kabuto's hands, reminding the Toad Sannin of something he'd seen Tsunade do before. If his memory was right, her hands would do that when she was doing field surgeries. Kabuto blitzed straight for him, slashing his hands towards his throat and sternum. He deflected the strikes by hitting Kabuto's wrists away from himself, retaliating with a short thrust kick. A look of surprise covered Kabuto's face as he stood back up, getting a smile from his opponent. I was on Tsunade's team, brat. Did you really think I wouldn't recognize a chakra scalpel? I've never seen them be used during combat before, but that doesn't mean I won't be cautious. Kabuto smirked back at his far more experienced foe, arrogance already bleeding back into his stance. I guess you aren't as stupid as Orochimaru-sama always says. Though he might just be comparing you to himself, rather than the average person when he does that. Either way, how long do you think you'll be able to fight that precisely at your age? Unlike my master, you can't take the bodies of younger people to extend your own life. Jiraiya glared back at the smug prick he was stuck against. Disgusted that someone would willingly serve Orochimaru when they knew about that technique. Why don't you just let me seal you? I'm sure you miss your brother in the pure world. You've already died for Konoha once, this isn't your fight anymore. Orochimaru knew that he was rather charismatic. But he was disappointed when his words seemed only to make the already stern Nidame's features harden even further. I worked myself to the bone to help my brother create Konoha. I would suffer 1,000 painful deaths to keep it alive. Suiton, Mizurappa. Without a single hand seal, the Nidame launched one of his favorite jutsu. Orochimaru dodged by diving underground, popping back out to the left flank of the former Kage. Orochimaru snapped his left arm forward, and swarm of snakes flying from his sleeve and attempting to hold his opponent still long enough to use the Gogyo Fuin. His hopes were dashed when Tobirama glowed and appeared where Orochimaru had been when the fight started. You're too slow. However, I'm not so merciful as to give you the chance to surrender. The Sannin grit his teeth in frustration, wishing he had stolen and learned the Hiraishin after the Yondaime had modified it. Things weren't really progressing in Naruto's fight. If not for his chains, he would have been turned into Swiss cheese. However, his opponent's skin was tough enough that the hien that he ran throughout the chains and Nuwabari needed actual contact and force to penetrate it. Perhaps another dance would suit this battle better. Tsubaki no Mai. Naruto tensed as he watched the bones retract, only to be replaced with solid bone swords in each hand. The flowing, graceful movements that had been the hallmark of the last dance were nowhere to be seen in this one. Rather, Kimimaro began launching rapid stabbing attacks with both hands. However, Naruto quickly realized why this was not the first of the dances used. The overall speed of the attacks is higher, but there was no pattern to where the attack came from. Naruto was thoroughly impressed. This dance was a technique of sheer chaos turned into a set of infinite movement performed with incredible unpredictability. It was, much like the first style his foe had used, a dance. Where the first had been graceful, flowing, and rhythmic, this one was discord and syncopation, the thrusts given out like staccato beats. He leapt back when one of the thrusts nicked his ribs, one of the many movements finally slipping through. Too bad Gaara isn't the one fighting him, that absolute defense would be great here. Naruto didn't have much time before Kimimaro moved to close in once more. Though this time it was the Kagaya that leapt backwards. Naruto had whipped his chains forward, though they moved to their previous position after stopping the advance. Naruto breathed deeply, letting the Nuwabari slide out of his hands until he grabbed the wire connected to its end. He began to spin the blade, as well as his chains. I guess you'll be the first to see my Kenjutsu style's true abilities, since it was rather chaotic when I last used it to kill your master's men. Kimimaro's face betrayed no emotion, though Naruto's voice was rougher than it had been when the battle had begun. He nearly backed away as the chains began to flicker with a red light, and Naruto's eyes became slitted and crimson. The glowing red chains took so much of his attention he nearly didn't notice the single white blade of the Nuwabari. Naruto wasn't out of surprises yet, as the last Kagaya was soon to find out. Even when the blade was dodged, Kimimaro noticed an odd stinging sensation coming from the shoulder closest to where the blade had passed. Even without a direct hit, Naruto's special Kenjutsu was more than capable of injuring his foes. By running a heavy amount of futon chakra through the Nuwabari, and using the thrashing red chains covered in the Kyuubi's chakra as a distraction, Naruto could slice apart most foes without ever getting near them. You're almost good enough to fight for the sake of Orochimaru-sama. It is unfortunate that you support a foolish village rather than his immortal greatness. However, I must stop you. Karamatsu no Mai. Needle-like bones burst from most of the fanatical shinobi's body, catching and attempting to sever the wire of the Nuwabari. One of the chains reached forward to grab Kimimaro, however, forcing him to let go. You're probably the best I've ever fought. I find it just as much of a waste that you are fighting for that unyouthful lunatic as you do that I don't. We aren't getting anywhere at this rate though, so I'm gonna have to step it up. Naruto sealed his blade back away, releasing the wrapping from his hands and allowing the Kyuubi's chakra to subside. He created a single Tora seal before dashing at his opponent. Kimimaro used his bone protrusions to grab onto Naruto, but was shocked when the Naruto he grabbed burst into wood that wrapped him up and nailed itself to the ground. He quickly realized what had happened, but it was too late. He was thrown out of the genjutsu when he felt a massive kick to his chin, enough power to disorient even his tough body thrown into the blow. He had less than a second before he was wrapped in a tight grasp and found himself corkscrewing to the ground. He forced more bones out, but the one holding him blew apart once more, though this time it was smoke. Naruto watched as his challenger crashed into the ground, his odd skeleton likely keeping him from being heavily injured, but giving him the time he needed to try and think of a different strategy. He really wished that either Shino or Shikamaru was there to help him, they would have figured a way to beat this guy by now. His thoughts were interrupted when Kimimaro stood back up, covered in odd black markings. I can't believe you forced me to resort to my Juin. I am done underestimating you. Naruto was glad that he'd had a clone use the Omote Renge, otherwise he would either have died from the bone counterattack or be too wiped out to fight anymore. Kimimaro's skin began to darken, the marks growing and joining together as he used more and more power. Naruto took several steps back as he watched the eerie transformation, uncertain exactly what the Juin's limits were. When it ended, Naruto was facing a very different Kimimaro. His upper body was much the same, with the exception of grayish-brown skin. His bottom half, however, resembled some kind of bipedal lizard, with a long spiked tail, descending from his spine. His legs were now thick, ending in oddly shaped, heavily armored feet. This is the power Orochimaru-sama gives to the best of his followers, powers that would make someone like you truly strong. Now, die for my master. Tesenka no Mai, Tsuru. Naruto watched wide-eyed in disgust as Kimimaro pulled out his own spinal cord, backing away when the disturbing shinobi began to brandish it as a whip. He needed some time to prepare for a move that could kill the durable bone shinobi, and thankfully he knew a technique that could give it to him. Hiding behind a barrier formed from his flickering chains, he formed the seal for one of his newest jutsu. Ninpo, Kirigakure no Jutsu. The words were barely a whisper, unheard by any on the battlefield. Jiraiya could feel his chakra control and power returning the longer he stalled out and dodged the fierce strikes that Kabuto kept launching at him. Soon, he would be able to use his hair jutsu and turn the foolish boy into a pincushion. He took advantage of another opening left by Kabuto's attacks to send a palm strike to the younger shinobi's solar plexus. Though he let out an exasperated sigh when Kabuto once more stood up unharmed. Might as well give up, fool. I can heal any injury you give me without your powerful jutsu. Maybe next time you shouldn't drink so much on a mission. That irritatingly smug grin was still on Kabuto's face, even though he hadn't managed a single hit on the superior warrior he was facing. It fled his face as fog covered the battlefield, however, since he didn't immediately recognize the technique. Tobirama grinned, welcoming the coming fog wholeheartedly. He knew that it was Naruto, his skills as a sensor didn't require the finger to the ground this close. He also knew that he and Naruto had the greatest advantage in the fog, with his sensory abilities and Naruto's ability to feel out his surroundings using the chains. Seems Naruto is growing bored with your toy, traitor. I can't think of any other reason to use a technique he's known for all of 3 days. Tobirama wasn't usually one to antagonize opponents, but he knew that many shinobi lost skill as they were enraged. Orochimaru was one of them, though it was rather difficult to enrage the cold-blooded shinobi. Orochimaru refused to answer to the taunt, fearing it was a ruse to get him to speak and reveal his location to another of the shinobi they were fighting. Naruto kept his chains at a long enough range that he was able to keep track of Kimimaro, who had stopped moving when the fog bank was called in. He knew from his studies that Orochimaru could blow his fog away if he found it too inconvenient, but gathering the chakra to do so would light him up like a beacon to the night aim. He had few techniques with more power than the Omote Renge, and with the even sturdier design his foe had taken, he wasn't sure if even they were capable of finishing him. He had a feeling that Tsunade could generate enough force to kill him, but he doubted that she was able to fight yet. Without her monster strength, he would need to try the Rasengan, see if he could drill through the thick skin of his enemy. If that failed, he would have to try and catch him in a water dragon like the Night Aim had and drown him. As soon as he made sure of Kimimaro's location once more, he grabbed him with his chains. The fog bank disappeared when he no longer needed it, allowing everyone to see what he was about to do. Try this one, straight from my father. Rasengan. The perfect blue orb of chaotic, barely contained energy formed in his hand while he reeled in Kimimaro, hoping that this would be enough to finally finish him. Until the one he grabbed turned into the white bone dust that his earlier constructions had. Sorry to disappoint you, but I'm not limited to taijutsu. Tesenka no Mai, Hana. Naruto turned and witnessed Kimimaro falling from the sky behind him, his right hand covered in a giant bone lance. Naruto dove out of the way, just in time as a massive crater former as the attack hit the earth he had been standing on. The attack wasn't finished, however, as Kimimaro snapped the whip in his left hand in an attempt to catch Naruto and drag him in for another strike. However, the ball of swirling destruction was still in Naruto's grip, and it connected with the lance that Kimimaro wielded. To the astonishment of both the Kagaya and Orochimaru, the lance began to fragment, shattering under the pressure of the Yandame's original jutsu. After the lance was destroyed, an enraged Kimimaro threw Naruto away from him, never having had his attack be bested before. That's the final straw. Sawarabi no Mai. The entire battleground began to shake, before the fighters all began dodging the giant bone spires that rose from the ground. All save Tobirama, who simply let his immortal form take the damage and regenerate. Naruto was having the most difficulty, as most of the spires were brought from directly beneath him. In desperation to avoid what was essentially a bone version of the Mokuton Hijitsu, Jukai Koten, Naruto activated a cloak with 2 bubbling fox tails. When he was struck by the next spire, the cloak stopped the bone from piercing him, melting it away with its acrid properties. Kimimaro came out of the spire that Naruto was now standing on, another massive lance poised to strike. It wouldn't find its mark, disease and exhaustion robbing Kimimaro of his power seconds too early for him to test his powers against Naruto fully. Orochimaru scowled as one of his strongest and most loyal soldiers died, desperation beginning to enter his thinking. He dove underground once more, this time appearing near to the still transfixed Tsunade. He thrust the Kusanagi, its blade extending to kill his former teammate while he could. A silver-gray flash appeared between his blade and target, halting its progress. Tsunade looked up as her great uncle held the Kusanagi that was piercing him, a Kage Bunshin of Orochimaru approaching with his fingers shining. Your last act in our world, wasted to protect a disappointment like your niece. Kukukukukuku. I shouldn't be surprised. Gojio Fuin. Immediately after the symbols of sealing appeared on the Nidame's body, the extra Orochimaru was struck with a violent blow by the last Senju. Uncle, I'm so sorry. If I had just listened and been mature, I wouldn't have had to lose you again. Tobirama turned his head and smiled, the sealing seemingly not taking effect. I would be going soon anyway, since I released the technique on myself before he struck me. I'm glad though, glad to see you have finally recovered. Please, watch over Konoha for me, and give my notes in the compound to Naruto. Remember, your grandfather and I love you, Tsunade. Nothing will change that. Tobirama crumbled into dust with a smile on his face, Tsunade turning away from him with a death glare for her old teammate. Jiraiya, I think it's about time you stop playing with that boy and help me with Orochimaru. Unless you'd rather just watch me pop him like a grape, I don't mind either way. All of the remaining combatants gazed at the slug Sannin in shock, particularly Orochimaru. With the energy he had used fighting Tobirama, there was no way he could beat his old team. Still, he had been the smart one, and he had an escape strategy planned out for this situation. With an angry hiss, he swung his blade wide. Everyone managed to dodge, until a second Kusanagi broke from the earth under Naruto. The first Orochimaru and his blade dissolved into mud, while the exhausted Jinchuriki slumped over the blade that pierced his stomach. Jiraiya shouted incoherently, enraged at the cowardly tactic to take out his weary student. I do hope you remember the blade is poisoned, and I know that you don't have the chakra required to fight me at the moment, Jiraiya. If you chase me, the boy dies. Come, Kabuto, we're leaving. Jiraiya began trembling in suppressed fury, before running to where Shizune and Tsunade were taking care of Naruto. He was surprised to see the blood not bothering his teammate, but he supposed it was clear to her how much the boy was worth. We have him stabilized, Jiraiya, but he won't be up for a few days. He used a lot of chakra fighting the Kagaya, and his body was already under the corrosive effects of the Kyuubi's chakra. In the meantime, I guess I should apologize for poisoning you. I wanted to do this myself and prove to both me and my uncle that I wasn't just some worthless, bitter old woman now. Tsunade was obviously struggling to say this. Heavily embarrassed for her rash actions earlier. Jiraiya gave her a relieved smile, before he opened his mouth and ruined the moment. Suheim, you'll never be old or worthless to me. Especially not with a rack like yours, they're still so perky. Jiraiya would wake up around the same time Naruto did. Thinking that the light blush he got with that tease was worth having a severe concussion. It was a quiet group that walked back into Konoha, the re-death of Tobirama and the escape of Orochimaru were the leading factors. Even Tsunade and Shizune were quiet, in spite of having not been in Konoha since before the Kyuubi attack. The first destination of the group was the Hokage office, though Naruto had pushed for them to go to the hospital first. The first person to greet them at the door was Shikamaru, Hiruzen being busy with paperwork. Hey, Naruto. I see your mission was accomplished, though the lack of a Nidame among your group is troublesome. Oh, and welcome back to the village, everybody. The last part of the greeting seemed tacked on, his mind wandering. It was soon clear why, when he sat down next to the Hokage and began working on another stack of papers. Before Naruto could comment on the insanity of Shikamaru willingly doing paperwork, Hiruzen looked up and began speaking. I'm glad you've returned, Tsunade. With the way things are going right now, we'll need your expertise. First things first, I want you to heal Jian and Yuhi. Afterwards, make your way to the head of the hospital's office. You will be replacing him effective immediately. Naruto, follow her. I think your sensei will appreciate seeing a friendly face when she wakes up. Naruto followed the two kunoichi out of the tower, beyond excited to see his secret girlfriend again. Shikamaru, why don't you take a break? There are things I need to discuss with Jiraiya. The new Chunin shrugged and stood up, giving a short bow to the two remaining in the room before going to find his team. I got the message, Jiraiya, and I must say I was rather shocked. Are you certain of your decision? The Gamasenin smiled at his sensei, before setting his jaw into a firm expression. Yes, it's something I should have done a long time ago, and I regret it to this day. The aged legend sighed, relieved. He put more tobacco into his pipe, giving a sidelong glance at the man he had practically raised. It's about time. Naruto had never been a particularly big fan of the hospital, even though he hadn't spent much time there. It was the smell, that acrid, sterile stench that made him dislike it. This was the first time he would be excited to be inside the building. He followed Tsunade, Hiruzen having broken off to visit the director's office. A slight shiver ran down his spine as they entered Kurenai's room, freezing him in place just past the doorway. It was obvious that her sleep/coma was troubled, her face scrunching in phantom pains and whimpers managing to struggle through her system. Everyone's become an amateur since I left, I swear. Hiruzen, or I could heal this in like 20 seconds flat. You guys really needed me here pretty damn badly, huh? Naruto didn't respond, leading the living legend to shake her head. There was no way that these two were as close as usual between sensei and student, though that didn't mean that anything was going on. In this case, she found it likely, but elected to simply begin treating Kurenai. Naruto waited with bated breath, anxious to see if Tsunade could really cure his sensei so easily. A stressful 15 seconds later, Kurenai stopped her pained whimpers and flinches. She had yet to open her eyes, simply breathing easily and resting for the first time in days. She should wake up in a few minutes, let me know how she's doing when you leave. Tsunade walked right by Naruto, he didn't even notice as he walked to sit down next to Kurenai's bed. Now that the nightmares, or aftershocks from the technique had cleared, she looked peaceful. I'm sorry, sensei. I tried to get him back for this, but I wasn't strong enough. No, even worse, I lost control. If something like this happens again, I don't know what I'll do. A hand rose from the bed and covered Naruto's mouth, sliding away to leave a single finger in its place. He blinked, looking down to see a weak smile on Kurenai's face, her eyes open. He looked straight into them, the ocean of his eyes crashing into the crimson fire of hers. The finger was removed, and Naruto began leaning down. Caught in the moment, he barely realized he was moving until he felt her breath on his lips. He leaned forward the final inch, tenderly massaging her lips with his own. He pulled away and opened his eyes, blushing all the while. Kurenai was similarly stricken, though for slightly different reasons. I'm so glad to be back, and able to see you. It was so hard to focus after I found out what happened. Kurenai sat up slowly, her body stiff from lying down for so long. She began trying to talk, but wound up coughing instead. Naruto quickly gave her a drink from his canteen. Naruto-kun, I don't think I've ever been so happy to wake up. I know just about everything there is to know about Jinjutsu, but the technique he used on me. I've never seen anything like it. Even with all my training, it felt so real. She wiped her eyes, gratefully allowing Naruto to hold her. She continued to relay the experience, her mind unable to bear the burden alone. It was like the technique I used on you during training, but 1,000 times more real. At first, it was physical torture, stabbing pain all over. I didn't think it could get worse, but he found a way. I blinked, and I was in my home. I thought that it had just been a nightmare, but a knock on my door distracted me. When I opened it, so many people were there. Anko, Yugao, Kakashi, Guy, the Sandame, Jiraiya, Hinata, Shino, and Haku. There were other faces, but I didn't recognize them. A sinking feeling in Naruto's stomach took hold. He had a feeling that he could guess where the rest of the vision went. He continued to stroke her back, waiting for her to take another drink and continue. Yugao spoke first, she was so angry. She said that I was under arrest, and that the whole mob had come to see justice done. Anko slapped me, before just walking away. I didn't get it, but then Guy, Kakashi, and Jiraiya came forward. They had found out about us, and everyone was disgusted. They said the same things to me that I did when I first realized, but it hurt so much more. Naruto was trying as hard as possible to calm both Kurenai's breathing and his own. He knew what he wanted to do to Itachi since he read that letter, but it was just getting worse. He wouldn't lose control the next time they met, and he would make the best of his training with Jiraiya. He could tell that parts had been left out, but if Kurenai didn't want to share the rest of what happened, he wouldn't make her. I'm glad you were the first person I saw when I woke up. Do we have time to spend together today? Naruto nodded his head, promising that they could spend more time together later. He would give her the privacy she would need to get cleaned and dressed, figuring he could stop to visit his dad before meeting back up with her. Great, I'll go home and get ready. See you in a few hours, Naruto-kun. See you later, Kurenai-chan. I love you. Blushing once again, Naruto took a deep breath and calmed himself down. No need to make people suspicious about him leaving her room with his face on fire. Kurenai answered with the same, though the smile on her face disappeared as soon as he was out of the room. Do we really know what we're getting into? Are we going to be able to keep this a secret long enough for it to be tolerated? I need to talk to someone. Kurenai scrunched her nose after that thought, deciding she should definitely take a shower before she spoke with anyone else. Naruto hadn't really wanted to leave Kurenai, but he knew she would need time to take a shower and prep herself. He was feeling pretty bad about how long it had been since he had spent much time with his dad, and figured that a couple hours while she got ready would be the perfect time to see him. Dad. I'm back from the mission. Those few words were enough to bring Guy running. Though the massive dust trail coming from the direction of the nearest training ground showed he hadn't been lax while Naruto was gone. Then again, Guy was never lax. My youthful son. I can barely believe my senses. How was traveling with Jiraiya and the Nidaime? Did you manage to keep up with your training? Naruto looked away as he was reminded about the Nidaime giving his second life just as he had his first. To protect those he loved. He hadn't spoken with Jiraiya about it, but he felt himself responsible for Orochimaru's escape. He forced a small smile and turned back towards his father. Yeah, I did. Jiraiya even taught me a new technique, while the Nidaime just beat me up and called it training. I understand that he was telling the truth, but even holding most of his power back, he decimated me. Rather than frown, or lecture, or try to convince Naruto that he was belittling himself, Guy acted with the same enthusiasm as always. Ha ha ha. You should be proud he thought it worthwhile to spar with you. Few in the history of the village have displayed the same type of power and dedication as Senju Tobirama. Only the flames of youth can guide someone on that path. As was typical when Guy was in this kind of mood, his teeth audibly pinged and reflected the light from behind him. The sun was at his back, and it wasn't late enough for street lights. I guess you're right, I just wish I hadn't screwed up so much on that mission. I barely managed to beat this weirdo with bone powers and transformative abilities, but Orochimaru stabbed me. Naruto was held back from immediately giving the rest of the details from his mission. As his father was looking back towards the gate Naruto left from, probably trying to figure out if he could run fast enough to catch the traitor's trail. I'm alright, Tsunade helped me. Come on, let's go inside and I'll tell you everything that happened. Guy begrudgingly followed his adopted son inside their home, still glancing back in some vain hope of spotting the snake's base. Anko, Yugao, I need your help. I know you both realize my feelings for Naruto, and before you say anything, no. I haven't done anything inappropriate with him. As much as I love him, he's not physically ready, and I'm not mentally ready. The two kunoichi looked at Kurenai, one confused and one bored. I really don't see what you need our help for. I've already given you all the advice I can, and Yugao only goes for people that are slightly older and insanely talented. Even if they are sticks in the mud. Kurenai just ignored Anko's outburst, knowing that her friend was just trying to lighten the mood, either that or she was insanely bored. I'm not looking for dating advice, it's just. Do you remember the first time I tried to be a sensei? That poor girl from the Kurama clan, Yakumo? I feel like having feelings for Naruto will make me fail the rest of the team as a sensei for a second time. I know that last time I was a chunin, and training her was supposed to help me for when I tried to take on a full team, but I couldn't even train her alone. Now, I'm afraid of focusing too much on Naruto and losing my other students in the process. The two other women looked at each other, silently deciding just what to say to their friend. Anko wanted to just tell Kurenai that she would be a great sensei anyway, but something was holding her back. You already know what the responsible thing to do is, and that's ignore your feelings and train them equally. Failing that, you'll have to tell your team that you are unfit to be their sensei, and tell them that they will be given a new one by the Hokage. Kurenai and Anko both looked towards Yugao, whose face was completely blank of expression now. The ANBU trick was easy to recognize, and they could tell she was only doing that to keep from wearing a face of sadness for Kurenai. I just don't know, and I don't want to be stuck in a situation where I have to make that choice. It would be just as bad if I tried to ignore Naruto and ended up not giving him the training he needs. I know that he's going to start learning from Jiraiya soon, but there's no way he'll be around enough for Naruto to get a regular experience. Anko spoke up again, voicing something she knew was bothering both of them. Kurenai, where did this all come from? What put Yakumo back on your mind, especially now? You've been happy and successful so far, hell, one of your students even made Chunin first try. The crimson-eyed beauty sighed, fearing that she would have to answer this eventually. When I was struck with Itachi's technique, he tortured me, forced all of my greatest fears from the depths of my mind. Somehow, he could see them, steal my most tragic memories, and make me see the worst possible consequences. What my feelings for Naruto might lead to, what my failure to help Yakumo might mean, what the amazing confidence I had in my team might lead them to do. It was all of my worst nightmares at once, accompanied by flaming blades in my skin. Kurenai had begun paling as she described her experience in detail, both of her friends shuddering at the idea of that kind of torture. On a mountain overlooking the village. It was one of the few times the guards would let her out, allowing her to enjoy the one hobby she had left. She knew that none of them cared for her, and that she wouldn't have deserved it even if they did. Her brush flicked across the surface of her painting, creating black smoke and ruddy orange flames on her representation of a certain apartment complex. All she would have to do is focus, and keep pouring herself into this work. She knew that one day it would work, just like it had before. A smirk cut its way across her face as she saw light and smoke bloom in the village, as she covered her new masterpiece with one she hadn't let the guards see earlier. No reason to let them know she was breaking free, at least not until her strength returned in full. Soon enough, she would finally show the village that they were right. She was someone to be feared. The smile on the young teen's face flickered, morphing into a look of panic for a brief few seconds before the cruel look was re-established. The dark smile grew the slightest amount. Soon, only one side of Yakumo would be in control, and the dark side was confident that she would be it. Naruto rubbed his eyes, before letting out a curse. He had been walking to Kurenai's apartment to hang out, when he had watched one of the walls spontaneously combust. Being a shinobi, he knew that there were ways for that to happen, and none of them boded well. Quickly forming the one-hand seal for the jutsu best for this situation, he sounded a shout. Suetun, Mizurappa. Just as his water technique was about to smother the flames on the building, it instead crashed into the wall and blew out a chunk of the building. The fire was gone, and no evidence it had ever happened remained. Naruto. Why did you attack my house? He turned to see Kurenai and her friends, staring at him in shock and confusion. Kurenai-sensei. I'm not sure. I was walking over to see you, and I saw your house on fire. When I tried to put it out, it just faded away like a genjutsu. I've never seen one that was so real though, not since the first time you hit me with the Hellview. Doubt crossed the faces of both of Kurenai's friends, while the woman herself just paled. Naruto, change of plans. Go get the rest of your teammates, we're having a team meeting immediately. I'm sorry, but this isn't something that can wait. She turned away from him immediately, heading towards the Hokage Tower. Yugao and Anko followed her, the three ignoring Naruto as he tried to question what was going on. This was all for now. Thank you for watching, I hope you liked it and that you will be back for more. Please like, share and subscribe. See ya.